Most people know me as the founder of StockX. In June of 2015, I moved to Detroit to start working with Dan Gilbert. Dan, who's the owner of the Cleveland Cavaliers and Quicken Loans and pretty much the entire city of Detroit. 2 months later, Dan took me with him to Under Armour to visit with Kevin Plank and everything they were doing there. Now, most of you will not remember this. The other half will not believe it. But in August of 2015, Under Armour was on top of the world. People thought that Under Armour was going to overtake Nike, and which is just nuts to think of today. But it made Kevin Plank pretty much the most important CEO in the world, if not at least in the industry. And so the way this day worked was the first half of the day, Kevin gave Dan and all of us, there was like 30 people total, a tour of all the things that were going on at Under Armour. And in the second half of the day, we go back into this big boardroom, this big, huge conference room. And all of us, we're going to take turns presenting the things we're working on to Kevin and his people. Now, somewhat informal, there's a lunch buffet set up. We all sort of grab some food and organically sit down. And there are no assigned seats, but Kevin ends up sitting down at the head of the table. And then the other three billionaires all sit down with Kevin. You have Dan, Tom Kartosis, who's the founder of Shinola and Fossil Watches, and then Ted Leonsis, who's the founder of AOL and owner of the Washington Wizards and Capitals. 2 months before this, I'm sitting at a cubicle at IBM. I barely even understand the extraordinary business royalty that are there. I got my turkey sandwich, I'm wandering around, and I end up sitting right here. All right. By the way, just for context, this is about what everyone's net worth was at the time. I think they all probably have some extra zeros. And then there was me. Except that's actually not true. It was more like that. Look, I buy a lot of sneakers. Also, this is August of 2015. StockX wouldn't launch until February of 2016. So all we were talking about, this was vapor. It was an idea. There was no business that we were going to present to all these people. But we're coming off of the first Cavs Warriors championship. So fortunately, we have some context to go on. Dan, obviously the owner of the Cavs, Under Armour being a Steph Curry being an Under Armour guy. And so what had happened was, after the first championship, Steph Curry's signature shoe called the Curry One MVP, they did this rare shoe. It was, there were only 500 pairs. It retailed for $120. And as a result of all these extraordinary things, first championship, Steph Curry becoming a god, this shoe then becomes resells on the secondary market for about $500. Now, for anyone who has any context about the resale sneaker market today, this was a much different time. August of 2015 is pre-StockX, pre-GOAT, pre-Yeezy, pre all of it. So eBay was the largest marketplace. And so as a way to explain what we were working on, as a way to explain StockX, I created a chart that was basically like this. We had 45 minutes on the calendar to tell everyone in the room. And so I led with this slide. This is like, hey, here's the industry. Now, I put up this slide. Kevin Plank is this far from me. And he stands up and he says, I knew we should have made more. Which completely blew my mind. First of all, I didn't expect him to stand up, let alone there's 40 people in the room, and I'm completely speechless. And I was like, no. And then I get to go there and explain to him that this is basically the first cool Under Armour shoe ever, that it's reselling the way that Jordans resell, and as a result, all other Curry ones are now all also going up in value. So this sparks an extraordinary conversation. Everyone in the room is involved. I am now standing up in the middle of this business, super team, directing traffic, the whole room, this conversation, and I'm the sneaker expert in the middle of it. Finally, Dan, being the much more astute business person than I am, realizes that we're way off track, pulls the conversation way back to StockX and say, hey, this conversation is about StockX. It's going to be worth $8 billion when valuations go crazy in 2021. So we go through, I start pitching StockX, we finish it up, and Kevin says, well, I want to invest. And Dan says, well, you can invest. That would be a conflict of interest to have Under Armour as a major sneaker company. And Kevin says, rats or something. And then Ted says, well, I want to invest. And then Dan says, okay. This is the part that should be quicker. Dan says, okay. And I say, wait, is this really how billionaires invest in each other's companies? And Dan says, yeah. And Ted says, yeah. And Tom says, who let the thousandaire sit at our end of the table? And Ted said, it's okay. He seems to know a lot about sneakers. And that is a true story of how I became friends with Ted Leonsis. Thank you. No, that's not the story. The story is this. I knew we should, this is the most important CEO in the world, certainly in the industry. And this was his reaction. August 2015, Under Armour on top of the world. January of 2020, Under Armour in a much different situation. January of 2020, the New York Times wrote a piece called How Under Armour Lost Its Edge. And from this angle, I'm going to attempt to read an exact excerpt from this piece. The first Curry shoe had sold out immediately, and Aaron Miller, Under Armour director of footwear, who was in the room that day with us, wanted to double the number of Curry 2 shoes produced. That quantity, he believed, would also sell out, increasing demand for the next model, the Curry 3. But top execs, he recalled, requested 3 times the number of shoes he recommended, so 6x, even as he argued that could cause a glut. The executives won, and Curry 2 shoes eventually flooded the market, winding up on sale racks. So, what am I saying? Am I saying that if Kevin Plank had listened to me in the room that day, that Under Armour would be bigger than Nike? Well, you can say that. No, this is the question. How many Curry 2 shoes should they have made? You make too few, you leave money on the table. This is Kevin Plank saying, I knew we should have made more. You make too many, shoes sit on sale racks, it's not cool, you lose brand value. This is the director of footwear saying that we shouldn't make as many, right? This is a supply problem. This is the central supply problem at the heart of the entire hype economy. All of these products that are at finite supply, sneakers, streetwear, watches, handbags, collectibles, trading cards, all of these products have this fundamental supply problem because the right answer is one number. Either side you're off creates real significant business problems, except that it's not actually a supply problem. It's a pricing problem disguised as a supply problem. So, as a way to explain that, we're going to get super basic. In fact, it's great to go on a college campus because this is Econ 101 at its most basic, right? There's only 3 variables in Econ 101, supply, demand, and price. So, if you are making a widget in a hype economy, a product that needs to be manufactured at a factory, supply has to be decided in advance. Except demand, well, demand is unknown. You can't possibly know how many people are going to buy what you sell until you put it for sale. And price, well, price in the retail economy is fixed. Where you and I buy consumer goods, you don't walk into Foot Locker and have the price change while you're walking around. It could though, or at least it could on the internet where we buy most of our things, right? The closest example for you and I for consumer goods that we buy with variable pricing are things like Delta, airline tickets, and Uber. Now, granted, these are digital products. The change in price happens algorithmically behind the scenes, but these are efficient markets. So we'll see how these work. With Uber, supply is fixed. At any given moment, you go on the ride to hail a car, there's a fixed number of cars available at that exact moment in time. And then demand, well, demand is an input, right? You're saying, I want a car at this exact moment. And then price is the variable output of that. Supply is fixed, demand's input, price is the output. That's the efficient market. Compare that to compare that to Under Armour, right? In the retail economy, if price is fixed and supply has to be decided in advance, and it's a guess, 3x, 6x, whatever, well, then demand is a hope and a dream that you might possibly get that right, that you might possibly nail that exact number exactly right. So when we start and say that everything is priced wrong, that is what we're talking about. By definition, everything that has to be priced wrong, it can't possibly be right. This, on the other hand, that is right. It can't be wrong. You're taking supply and demand. This is what we call market-based pricing, where supply and demand are the inputs and price is the output. And this is just a mess. And this is why Ted usually doesn't like us using a lot of charts. So let's just simplify it. It's just about price, right? It's just about price. Fundamentally, in the hype economy, for these consumer products that you and I buy, fixed price is fundamentally wrong. It just is. It's an economic fact. And variable pricing is fundamentally right. The problem is, how could we possibly apply that? We can't apply it in real life. We can't apply it when we walk into a store and our prices change. So can we apply it digitally in the products we buy? Well, this is what I've been doing for the last 10 years. Every company that I've started, every company I've run at its core is based on market-based pricing. Supply and demand as inputs to find the true price. So how do we apply that here? Well, we spent years talking to economists and market makers and professors, and we think the right answer is something that's called a blind Dutch auction. Now, we didn't make this up. This is a form of pricing that's used in finance and other areas, but we're applying it to consumer goods. So, how does it work? Well, first I should say that the first time we ever did one was in January of 2019 with a celebrity jeweler named Ben Baller. And yes, this is the most ridiculous picture I could find of Ben Baller, but it highlights a point, which is that he is a brand. He is not Nike, he is not Adidas, but he is a brand. We create a product, even a slide like this, there is some demand around his product. So how do you understand that demand? How do you take that in? That's the idea. By the way, we ran this as a blind Dutch auction, and it worked perfectly. It worked exactly the way it's supposed to work, so much so that professors from Harvard reached out and said, hey, we saw that. We think that is an ingenious, the right way to price scarce goods. They end up doing a case study that's in HBR. It's taught at business schools, including this one. So there was real validation behind this. So how does it work? Well, first, let's look at the goal. The goal, again, is this. Fixed supply, demand is an input, price is the variable output. So I'm going to run you through an actual blind Dutch auction that we did for a company called Ghostwrite, which is a collectible toy company. You can think of collectible toys as art, which is the perfect product for this because art has no function. It just sits on its shelf. It doesn't do anything. So its value can only be a function of supply and demand. So, okay. So you start with fixed supply. In this case, there were 20 units that we were selling. And full transparency, you tell everybody how many units are available for sale. In this case, there were 20 units available for sale for this thing. This thing is about this big. Okay, that is your fixed supply as a starting point. Now you want to take demand as the input. So you take in what are called blind bids. Now, there's no right or wrong way to do this. We usually give people about 3 days. Anytime they want, they can come to the website, use their PayPal or credit card, and say how much they're willing to pay for this product. So that is true consumer demand. They're saying, I will buy this product for X amount of dollars. Now the bids are blind, meaning you can't see when anyone else is bidding. That's intentional. You don't want to create FOMO or people trying to beat a clock or any sort of chaos. You want to eliminate all that and just try to get to true demand. So you take in all the blind bids, and these were the real bids that came in for this. This happened in August. The highest bid was 2501, 1768, and on down. Okay, we now have our demand as an input. So what is the variable pricing output? This is the Dutch auction part. A Dutch auction uses what's called a clearing price. And a clearing price is the lowest winning bid. Or in this case, because there were 20 units, the 20th highest bid. So that is the 20 in green. The lowest bid there is 356. So 356 becomes the clearing price. And everybody pays the clearing price, even the person that bid 2501. This does three things. First, it ensures that the top 20 bidders win. These are the people who are allowed to purchase the product. In the hype economy with these products, being allowed to purchase the product, that is the win. Being allowed to have access to the product. Two, they're all buying the same asset at the exact same moment in time. So it'd be illogical, it'd be unfair to charge people different amounts. And three, no one can argue that this isn't a fair market price because they were all willing to pay at least $356. So now, as a starting point, we have a fair and equitable form of distribution for high demand products. By the way, that alone is significantly different than how most of these products are distributed today with lines and chaos and bots and raffles. But what we really care about is the value. So this happens to be a true win-win-win across all three entities in the system. For the consumers, 95% of the people get the product for less than what they were willing to pay. By the way, that's because there are only 20 units. If this is 100 or 1,000 units, this becomes 99.9%. So even though the clearing price might be, in fact, often will be, much higher than what the arbitrary retail price would have been, everybody feels like they win. They did win because they get it for less than what they valued the product at. For the brand, Under Armour gets to economically maximize both their revenue and their brand. There isn't more Kevin Plank saying I should have made more, Director of Footwear saying you should have made less. Economically maximized. And finally, and this is the most important part, for the market itself maintains hype. What does that mean? It means grails, not bricks. What does that mean? It means that the shoe itself will be more valuable, or excuse me, whatever product will be more valuable. Here's why. This is economic theory. This is not a guess. This is the demand curve. These were the bids that came in, but the number of people that can participate in anything over a 3-day period can only be a sample size of the world at large. You're never going to have the whole world come and participate. But what it means is, if this is a sample, that some percentage of the population is willing to pay more than $356 for this particular product. So, once everyone pays $356, that fundamentally becomes the retail price. They all take possession of it just like any other product we buy anywhere else, and they're free to do whatever they want with it, including sell it on the secondary market if they want. And if this is the demand curve for this product, then the resale price should be somewhere greater than the clearing price, but less than the highest bid. If I had to guess, with this data, I would say the resale price would be about $700. Now, these are real demand. These are real bids that came in. The clearing price really was $356. And then once everyone took possession, product page went up on StockX, and the resale price was $1,400. And in fact, every single blind Dutch auction we've done, everyone has worked out the exact same way, including the last 5 ghosts. All of them, the resale price has been greater than the clearing price. This is an efficient market. These are all efficient markets. Under Armour, what they were doing, that is an inefficient market. All of the products that are sold in the hype economy, they're all sold at a fixed price. It's all inefficient markets. So when I say that everything is priced wrong, that is not the big idea. That is the facts. That is the context. The big idea is that we can fix it. Also, Ted Leonsis is my friend. Thank you very much.